Uh, all right, let's start our new lecture, and today I would like to talk about how do we close a socket, closing sockets. Remember, in the previous lectures we have shown that in order to communicate between a client and a server, you have to create a socket on the client side, you create a socket on the server side, and we did that through a previous slide here. I think in order to create a socket, we said we use the statement socket client, we call it client, new socket localhost 2000, where the 2000 is the port number on the server side. And on the server side we have socket client equal server accept, but remember that we must have created the server socket. Let me see, where do we create the server socket? Oops. I think I can show that here. This is my server, and we create the socket. It's class in the class server. Okay. Okay, right here. So we have this statement. Server socket is of the name server. We say new server socket, and here is where we define the port 2000. So 2000 is the port number on the server side, and we define within this socket, within the server socket, we define this client. This is the place where we communicate with one client. Now, if I were to do another client, I could write something like this: socket client 1 equal server dot accept. In this case, I will be waiting for yet another client to, I call it client 1, to come and to use this server, however, at the entry client 1. For now I'll just comment this because I don't want this here. So we already know how to create a socket both on the client side right here, on the server side right here, and we have also created the input output stream. Remember, I said I want to associate the out variable as an input, actually as a place to write into the client. So I'm outing, when I say out, I'm outing into the client, I'm sending into the client, and here in I'm getting into the client from the socket client. Similarly, this out I write into the server socket, and I read from the server socket. So now we have created these three things: client socket, output stream, input stream to the client socket. On the server side, I have created the socket, the output stream, the input stream. What this means now is that on my computer, on my client and on my server, I have something open. When I say the client is open, because I have created this socket, and there is any communication into the client coming into this port. Now later we will find out how do I know the port on the client. The port of the server is already known, it's 2000. So the data coming here into the server, coming into port 2000, will always be, as long as the socket is open, any data that comes in, it will actually enter the server. And once it's in the server, in the socket, it will immediately go into this N, because there is a direct communication between the memory location SS and the memory location N. So in principle, let me say this is a very dangerous concept. Why is it dangerous concept? As I said, because here, let me use the oval. This is my socket here. This is the client socket. Okay, just make it a little big, and I have the server socket. Oops. Okay, that's my server socket, and I have the communication that goes between this guy and this guy, and I have similarly communication that goes between these two. Also, as I said, this is, I have the out here, and no, actually I want this guy. This is my out, and this is my N. Okay, and also let me put them on the server side, out and N. And I have this, although I'm repeating myself, but this is very important to understand this concept. All right, and this goes into this direction. This is wrong. This has to go into the other way. Okay, now when I am done with my program, after I finished my echo server, my chat session, something has to be done urgently. I must clean behind myself. Clean behind myself means I have to close this socket, and I have to close this output stream into the socket, and to close this input stream into the socket. Similarly, I have to close this socket and this output stream into the server socket, and this input stream out of the server socket. We have to close them, because if we don't close them, let's say I finish my program. Let me open one of my codes here. This is my client, and okay, this is my client. I finished my program, and I did not close these things. I did not write these client. Now this is the method to close: client.close, in.close, out.close. Now for a second I will use these, although these statements are correct, but they are inappropriately ordered. That's not the proper order, and I will show why. Okay, so I will come back to my PowerPoint slide here. Okay, and oops. Okay, now this is a method I called, now this is client socket, client.close. So I did close my port, so this port is no longer accessible. When I say client.close, actually what this does, it deletes this address. So this address, which is the client address that goes into the memory. Remember I said this client socket actually is an address into the memory, into, oh, let's say if this was my memory right here. So this socket is actually, it's an address that goes from here somewhere into this memory location. And let me just make this a little bit thicker. So when I say client.close, this link, this address or this address into the memory is gone, is deleted. However, However, the socket here, the memory location and the data that goes into this memory is not is no longer accessible. So if anyone comes to this port, to this location, you cannot get to the memory, and if you cannot get to the memory, you cannot get to my computer. So when I say client.close, I am closing this port, so the data that's coming from here or from anywhere else, it will not find its way into my computer. It will be blocked. That's the main thing. Now, if I do not do that, if here, let me scratch this. How do I scratch that? Okay, I think. Okay, I think I don't know how to scratch that. There is a way to... Anyway, so if I delete this guy, let me just delete it. Take it out. If I delete it, then the socket is closed. This socket is closed. I can no longer access the socket. However, note that if that one is deleted, now this N, which is associated with the client, and this out, which is associated with the client, I cannot access them. So if I say n.close, it will not work. This may execute, but it will not close this link. And this link is not defined. Why? Because when I say delete or client.close, this thing will be gone. If this is gone, those links are dangling. They are dangling. They have nothing to be associated with. So this is the wrong way of closing the socket. Let me go back. Okay. So the proper way of closing these sockets, I have to do this order. I'll put the close the N. So when I say N close, so I remove now this N, okay, which is fine. Okay, now I did, let's say I take this out. Now this link is, the socket is still there. It does have a link, but this link is, the N is no longer exist. Then I delete, I say out.close. So I'm gone with this, I'm done with this. So this is gone. Now the client.close, actually I still have my client. So if I do the close and this is gone and I take this out, so actually I am absolutely okay. There is no problem. So I deleted. Let me go back and show again my slides. All right. So the order is, you take the N or out, it doesn't matter. Now I can do that. I can put the out before the N. It's perfectly all right. But definitely either the out or N and then the client. The last thing I should close is the socket itself. I cannot close the socket first, like here. I cannot do that. If I do that, I will have a problem. My in and out will never be closed. Although I can execute these statements, but they will never be closed. They will always be open. And because they are open, actually this will create several problems. One of them is called memory leak. So my memory will be depleted. I will lose lots of memory. And also the potential of coming into this in and out is still there, so I cannot guarantee that. The same thing will happen to the server socket close. Let me go to the to my programs here. Okay, this is my program, my server. Okay. actually on my server side I will have four things. Not remember, for the server socket I created the server socket. I created within the server client which is going to communicate with this guy. I created the in stream, I created the out stream. So now in order to delete things and to remove them from my server, I will do them in the following order. The last thing I should take out is my server socket. Now before the server I should take out the n. Actually I will make this order, although this is can be okay. I will take the n, so I remove the n, so this is my n, and I remove this guy. I close out dot close and I take this out. Then I will remove the client socket within the server, the one that is communicating with this client. Now if I had client 1, if I have created client 1, I will close it. If I created client 3 or client 2, I will also close it. I will close all of these ones. And of course, if I created the client 1, by the way, I should have created n1 dot close, because in order to communicate through client 1, I will have n1, I will have out1 dot close. Those should have been opened. Anything that I open, anything that I create in order to make the server work, I have to close it. Now I'll remove these things because I don't have them, so I'll just take them out. I will take client 1, client 2. I just demonstrated them as example. Anything that you create, you should delete. However, remember, the last thing to remove from your server is your server socket. And before that, you can remove the client which you created to communicate with this guy, with this client on the left hand side. And before that, you should remove the in and out using the in.close and out.close. This is absolutely important. If you don't do that, you will have a serious problem in the security you will make. Now, if you don't close these, if you close the program, you exit the program and you don't close the sockets, you are in deep trouble, because your ports are open and anyone can access your computer, and that's a problem. And in a very large development environment, when many people create programs and sockets and intercommunicating processes, they tend to leave sockets open. And if you have about 65,535 sockets, possible sockets for opening, so remember, you have more than 65,000 sockets which people open and tend to forget to close. So at any point of time when you run your program for a long time, you may have 10 or 15,000 sockets open on the client, on the server, on other clients. This is a very serious problem, because now I could have something I will call port scanner. Port scanner. Port scanner is simply, if I create a socket, let me just bring my statement here. Okay, if I don't close the socket, let me here, I say socket client equal new socket localhost 2000, or maybe this doesn't have to be localhost. I could say any 89.23.241.5. This is my IP address. Okay, that's an IP address. Now here I can repeat this statement 65,000 times. So actually I have a loop here somewhere. I say for I equal 1 to 65,000. Actually, I will do it from 0 to 4 to 65,534, and I will create just scan the ports. I'm not going to write the entire code, but remember, you can write something like this from I equal 1024 all the way to 65,000 and keep creating sockets, new socket, and here instead of 2000 put I, this integer. Actually, I'm going to this address looking for port 1024 and wait for a while. Maybe there is a waiting time. Wait for the server, this server here, to accept. If it does accept, then you exit this loop. If it doesn't exit, you go back and you keep trying. This is a very simple port scanner. The syntax may not be absolutely correct, but it will tell you if you do not close the sockets or this port, then you are in a danger of someone finding this port open after you finish your program, so you will have vulnerability. This is what I wanted to say about closing the sockets. This is a very important topic. You should keep it in mind all the time and make sure that you close all your sockets. Thank you.